All right, it is February 29th, 2023. Welcome to the 48th meeting of the Junto Club. So, this is inspired by Benjamin Franklin's Junto Club, where he had friends and colleagues meet to discuss business, politics, science, things like that. Try to understand the world around them and themselves better. This sounds very pretentious when I say it, but we're just three people who met at, college, and we're kind of doing something similar where we come, bring topics we want to discuss. One person tries to read a little bit about it, learn a little bit about it, and then we discuss it just to, continue learning new things. So that's essentially the essence of the Junto Club. We usually start with a quote brought to us by Shu. It used to be always Benjamin Franklin quotes, but we started to run out of them. So, what do you have for us today?
Since we're talking about thinking fast and slow in the book, I think it's talking about bias. I think in our thinking. So I think that this quote is appropriate for today is from Munger, Charlie Munger. The quote is, quote, "If you don't allow for the bias in the conduct of others, you are a fool." End quote. Any thoughts?
So, I mean, just the first thing that comes to mind is like humans are biased just by their experiences and, sort of the nature of our brain. Like, our brain is specialized to learn from what it observes and, like, can over amplify, like, or overgeneralize, I guess, from specific examples. So, I mean, so you have to anticipate that people are going to be biased. So you need to basically like the way you handle them, you need to like essentially perspective take and understand that, like to anticipate how they might behave.
Hmm.
So I guess that's what jumps out to me. There's a fly
Yeah.
in my face.
Oh, I thought that was just a dramatic
No,
gesture.
that was a dramatic gesture. Dropping the mic.
No,
So,
I mean that's the exact same thing I thought. I not sure if there's other ways to read this, but to give a physical analogy, it's like calibrating a sensor, right? Like there's going to be error, so you like take into account that error when you're reading measurements from it, right? Kind of loosely. You got to if you don't account for the bias that's everyone has, you're not going to make as good of decisions based on what they tell you.
This I can apply to everything. Like you should allow racism in others as well. It's one of bias, right? Racial bias and stuff like that. It is even we try to remove like get rid of racist bias in racial bias in other people like as a country in a whole.
Hmm.
I don't think we really can do that because everybody is a little bit. I mean, I say it many times before. Now everybody is a little bit racist. Because you always everybody had prejudice like we likes and don't like right. Anyway,
You know,
it's just
no,
I guess my extreme thinking coming out just
no, I
based
mean
on reading this again. Yeah.
that's actually a good point because I mean, well, a long time ago we touched on critical race theory and stuff, right? But they're
Mhm.
critical of the whole sort of colorblind like race neutral policies, and a lot of
Mhm.
often will advocate for things like affirmative action. And part of the justification is that is people can't actually not be biased, right? So even if there's no thing where the university's not going to say we're not accepting students from XYZ, they accept everyone, right? But they will say the
Mhm.
people who are making these decisions are still biased. So if you don't systematically account for that, you'll still have that get in. So it's the same idea. It's
Yeah.
actually there's a decent number of people who believe that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
no.
mean.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I recently had to take a class, like, like everyone at the company took a class, like, on like mitigating bias, and basically, like, to mitigate bias is yes, essentially to undergo like metacognition, basically, and like basically like why am I making the decision I am making, as opposed to like because if you go with your sort of initial decision, like everyone is going to introduce bias, whether that be race based, whether that be like this person went to the same college I did, like there's just
Mhm.
like there's always going to be something there where you may more easily relate to another person, and it's like am I
Exactly.
making a decision for the right reason or not? So
on a much less serious note, the or at least somewhat less serious. The example I was thinking of is like when you have employees talking to their bosses, or like, lower level people talking to higher level people in like political structure, especially like very hierarchical, more like dictatorship style ones. It can be sometimes, people always want to give the best view of the situation, the work they've done, like what's going on, right? So leaders need, it's kind of like if your angry dictator gets a bunch of yes men that don't tell them the real situation, because they don't want to be the ones, who say, they're always going to try to bias it as much as possible to, look good, right? Oh yeah, this thing
Mm-hmm.
is, everything's working out, at least to some point, right? Everyone's going to do that a little bit. So if you don't, reason in the fact that, oh, just because your employee or the person under you says it's good, consider the incentives, if what, and if they're being 100% objective about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
All
All
right,
right.
but was a good quote, because when we get down to the main topic later, there will be a lot of related stuff on this. So,
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
but
All right. Talking more about bias later. All right.
but
Do you guys
but
watching the Super Bowl?
a little bit.
Oh,
I watched
Mike
everything.
probably watching the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
So you got
How
to
was
see
it?
Philly get robbed by the refs.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, the
Wait,
holding
Matt,
call that sort of was a holding call, but yes, it was a shitty timed holding call. So,
what happened in the end? Actually, I did hear a little bit. I didn't watch the football, so.
oh, well, I mean, basically, like um, basically, it was about 2 minutes left in the game. Philadelphia had, I believe, one timeout, and so it was a tie game, and Kansas City was within field goal range. Now, the strategy there is basically to get a first down, kneel, like get the clock to essentially 1 second and kick a field goal as time expires to win.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like 3rd and 7, and the Kansas City, like there was questions about whether like Kansas City would force Philly to use their last timeout and just run the ball, or whether they would throw and essentially go for the win, because if they get the first down, then they can do the kneel really short field goal. And so on that, like I think it was 3rd and 7 play, there was a holding call made, and defensive holding is automatically a first down.
Mm.
So basically, yeah, Kansas City got the first down, quote unquote, given to them by the refs, because yeah, like there was like, it wasn't like the guy tackled the guy, but he sort of did grab his jersey a little bit.
Well,
So
I mean, I can't blame the refs, because we get to see the zoomed in slow mode multi-angle replays right afterwards in the moment, and I don't think he even grabbed him. He sort of like had his hand just like gently press against the guy's back, no like clutching or grabbing at all. But the ref, out of the corner of his eye, whatever, saw hand on back, and was like, he thought it must have been a tug for whatever reason.
Yeah. So I mean, it raises an interesting question of like, how to call, like, because a lot of people, I feel like, were saying like, oh, that's a holding call in the second quarter, but this is like deciding the Super Bowl essentially. Because if Kansas City does not get that, then they're forced to kick a field goal, and Philadelphia has a timeout in like 2 minutes to go down the field. Instead, what ended up happening is Philadelphia, or rather Kansas City, got a first down, was able to run the clock down to like 10 seconds, kick a field goal, and Philadelphia only had a shot at a Hail Mary, which didn't even come close to the end zone. So, yeah, so a lot of people were saying
maybe the ref is biased.
Perhaps. I mean,
Indeed.
I've heard like, third, fourth hand, whatever this may be, but like on one of the radio shows I listened to, they had a guest on who was talking about like referees in the NBA like in the 90s. And apparently the referees were saying that like basically like off the record that like when they used to ref games with Michael Jordan, Like it was often, they would often like make bad calls. Like they acknowledged they made bad calls because it was sort of like you were just watching Michael Jordan. Like,
Oh.
like sort of, it wasn't like they wanted to be biased or give Jordan the game, but they sort of like, I guess we're just, sort of mesmerized or like, like there was some type of underlying bias that they didn't even necessarily like realize they had. It wasn't like they were trying to cheat one way or the other, but it was just sort of
Yeah.
the nature of the game and who he was.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Cool.
so yeah. So maybe the moments got, in a way, yes, did influence the ref throwing the flag.
Okay.
So.
Maybe.
So Matt, were you not rooting for Phillies?
Of course I was. I mean, I'm not gonna say like I was a super hardcore fan, but we were rooting for them and we were ready to run out to the city if we won, to see the chaos, watch
Gotcha.
cars get flipped and buildings get destroyed. But then it was then they lost and it was like cold and drizzly, so we didn't go. And
Yeah.
it was good because we saw a video later and everyone's just like kind of quietly walking back through the center of the city. It's like, yeah, it's depressing now, no fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No poles were climbed, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And Mike, you mentioned I want to ask something about Ticketmaster. Did you like recently went to the Blackpink concert, right?
Yes.
Did you use Ticketmaster?
Yes.
How I guess so Ticket I mean recently I think Ticketmaster has been sued by all those like Taylor Swift fans, right? Or something like that about a ticket thing.
Yeah. Taylor Swift was a
So
disaster. Yeah.
yeah, I guess I'm just wondering why is Ticketmaster so bad, and also why is it no competition to Ticketmaster, right?
Well, I think that's the answer of why it's bad. It doesn't have to be good because I mean, it's essentially Ticketmaster. Like Ticketmaster and Live Nation are like one and the same now, I think. So like,
Okay.
so I think all essentially the big like are actually, I don't know that it necessarily has to do with the artists as much as I think Ticketmaster has like relationships with like all major venues at this point. So
Mm.
like they sell through or most venues, if they don't sell through their own website, will sell through Ticketmaster.
So how was your
Mhm.
experience with Ticketmaster?
I mean, for Blackpink, it was okay. Like
Okay.
Blackpink, but I mean, I think like they made it their mistake with Taylor Swift was like they put like every one of her concerts, which is going to be like multiple days at multiple football stadiums, like, or rather, well, multiple days at football stadiums in like many cities on sale all at the same time. So it's going to be like
Okay.
an insane amount of people trying to get like millions of people trying to get tickets all at once. So their servers crashed.
Mm.
So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, I mean, honestly, like they should have, like, where they saw the demand was so outrageous because, like, a lot, like, in order to get tickets, like, you needed to be like a verified Taylor Swift fan or what, like, you had to join something to like get pre sale access. Like they
Mm.
honestly should have made it like almost like an ordered thing. Like it should have been like you are number, whatever. Like and
Mm-hmm.
basically like that's your number in the queue. This is the time you can sign on and get tickets. Because yeah, where they just gave like basically they gave so many people pre-sale access that they like I think there were more pre-sale accesses than there were even tickets available for the whole concert. So
Mm.
it was, yeah. So it was just like everything, like the servers crashed. People were waiting like literally like all day, like from 10 a.m. to like, that night they were in, the digital line for Ticketmaster. So,
Interesting. I guess I heard more about scalping. Is that what they call the
oh
term?
yeah,
Yeah,
scalp it.
scalping, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. How?
well, Ticketmaster isn't like because Taylor Swift, I don't think allows for resale on Ticketmaster. So I don't think you can buy her like the value. I don't think you can buy her resold tickets on Ticketmaster. I mean, Ticketmaster does
Mm.
have verified resale for other stuff, but not Taylor Swift. So, and
Mm.
So
yeah,
does that mean are they like doing like ID checks? Like if you get the ticket, like you have to be the person who bought it, or Are they just saying like, you can't resell it on Ticketmaster, but you could like pass it to your friend in person?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like if you go on like StubHub right now, you can get Taylor Swift tickets. But yeah, they're
Mm.
outrageous. They're it's like 600 a seat for shit seats. But yeah.
Mm.
So I guess scalping is the problem that hard to address.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, so like that has become like a second like or like that's some people's like how they make livings practically is like you get like are really good at getting high demand tickets. You buy, 10 of them and then you resell them
Mm-hmm.
for double face value.
All right. I'm going to interject an unpopular opinion
Yes.
at
Yeah,
this
what's that?
moment. Scalpers aren't bad. They're just a symptom of a basic supply and demand problem. Because I see people online, whether it's for
Yeah,
this or like
yeah.
PlayStation 5s or whatever, graphics cards, people get so upset about it. And I'm not saying I like scalpers. Like I don't do it. I don't like think they're good people, but like the fundamental problem is there's just a mismatch between supply, demand, and the price, right?
Hmm.
So if an
Mm-hmm.
artist, if the scalpers didn't exist, it doesn't make it easier to get the tickets. It just makes it different how you get the tickets, right? A scalper makes it so that
Mm-hmm.
you can just, if you can pay enough, you can get it instead of being the first to click or the one who will wait in line the longest or something like that. And if you think that's a more fair way to allocate tickets, I guess. But what they really, in my mind, what artists should do is say, I'm going to stay in a city, for a week and not just stop in for a night and play one venue. I'll stay for a week and play 4, 5. And then everyone in the city,
Mm-hmm.
that wants to see it can do it, right? Provide enough supply to, deal with the demand. Or if they don't want to do that, just charge the tickets expensive. Make them expensive. Say, I'm only going to offer this for a limited number of people. I have a lot more fans than people who can see me. So, you know, pay up. And that would also solve the scalper problem. But I guess doesn't look as good, right? If you're just up front or like my tickets are going to start at $500.
And it makes sense, perfect sense to me. It's a business opportunity, right? So why would you not take it, right?
Hmm. Well, I don't think any of us are like big concert people, right? So I think there's
Mm.
there's definitely people who just like don't like the state of things, and they're like, oh, back in the day you could get concert tickets cheap, and you know that's what they want, which is understandable, I guess. But there's more
Mm-hmm.
people and more people with disposable income now, so yeah, that's just the way it is.
Okay. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, yeah. Just here on news, people just bashing those scalpers. I guess I call them entrepreneurs. I guess capitalists.
Well, back in the day, scalping was a harder gig. Like you had to get that. Like when I used to go to Bruins games, like when I was 7 or 8, like there would be people outside the garden, like being like looking for
Uh,
tickets, looking for tickets. It's like, no, we have tickets. So,
Hey,
yeah.
there's people who still do that, like
yeah.
walking around cities or colleges. Like if you're around like a big college game or near Madison Square Garden or something, there's people still hawking tickets on the street and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been reduced. I can't imagine someone in these days being like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna buy some guy's ticket on the
Right,
side of the street."
exactly. It's
But
like you could literally be like rather than buying his tickets, you could just literally go to Ticketmaster or one of the other websites and like get verified tickets or tickets that are at least protected, like even if they're fake, like you get your money back as opposed to just like I'm gonna hand cash to this random guy.
yeah, in the end, scalpers deal with jumping through the hoops to get, access to something limited, and then they sell that access to a rich person, basically. So the richer
Yeah. I mean,
or
they
wealthier person doesn't have to like do the things, right? They don't have to click and sit in internet queue all day because they'll just pay $500 extra and get it.
that makes sense. Yeah, and they do all the hard work. So, they gotta make some money.
Yeah.
Okay, now I do respect those scalpers now.
Oh, now you're a fan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they work probably hours and whatever, and they see an opportunity and they work their ass off to get the tickets, and then of course they need to be rewarded, right?
Well, like I said, I would just say if an artist isn't willing to do a few more shows, which is understandable if they're like, I'm not gonna just do like, constantly do shows, they should just set the prices higher to start with.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Anyway, are we on to the main topic now, Shu?
Yes.
Okay. So this topic is going to be a lot of talk about biases, or at least a little bit of a talk about biases, because no one wants to hear me talk for that long. So the book is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I probably should have Googled how to pronounce his name. You know, it's a
Yes,
book. I
Kahneman.
read it. I didn't like listen to the audiobook. So anyway, basically, this is a book that really is about just how people think, and a lot of that is about the biases that can come into that thinking. And the core structure of the book is that our thinking is kind of wrapped up into two different sort of modes: system one and system two. Very clear descriptions. System one is basically, your intuition. It's the really fast thinking that's automatic. You don't have any control of it. It doesn't take any effort either. It's your gut feeling, it's your intuition, your instinct, your initial response, right? So this is, and all the things that are associated with that. System two is when you actively think about something. It's like when you expend effort to focus on something, it's where your attention is, when you concentrate, when you're doing more sort of logical reasoning, that sort of system. And I think most people have an intuitive grasp of sort of the two differences, in how you can sort of make judgments real quick. So if you got to answer a question really fast, you'll do system one. If you sit and think about it, if you sort of test your answer, you're doing system two. In the robotics world, since we're all roboticists, this is pretty much deliberative, and reactive thinking, just in human brains instead of, autonomous architectures. So that is
So basically, he basically just the whole book is about basically our thinking can divide into two category. One, so the fast one is in the system one, and the slow one system two.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I would
Okay.
say that is sort of like a cornerstone of the book, but honestly, the majority of the book is, I would say, and I haven't finished all of it, but I would say a majority of it is about like various biases and examples of, ways our reasoning can go wrong. But it uses this background of, or this kind of base knowledge of, hey, you have two systems, to sort of frame those and kind of explore how they happen, right? Is it a bias in one? Is it a bias in the other? Is it a bias between the interaction between the two? Stuff like that. Okay, so, but I think so. The system one is what we normally honestly do most of our decisions and judgments on, and then we have system two has sort of a baseline level where it's used a little bit, but not that intensely, because it's, as I mentioned, it takes effort. This is where kind of this related research is where the concept of ego depletion comes from. To concentrate on something, to exert willpower, to focus your attention, does take effort, and it's a limited resource, both like over a duration. You can only do it for so long before your abilities will fall off, right? To focus, you have limited time, but also just in the moment, right? I mean, do you know what I'm talking about when I say the gorilla video?
No.
Do you know what I'm doing, Mike?
Gorilla video.
I
I
mean, no.
I'm gonna spoil what's actually a very interesting
Video.
thing, but there's basically a video, and they have some people, and they have a bunch of people passing basketballs, and I think they had, like, the one I seen might have had like two different shirt colors, and like, so
Oh,
two teams mixed in, and they're like, okay, count how many passes this team did. So it's a task where you got to really pay attention and focus on counting. And then at the end they asked, did you see the gorilla? And I was like shown this live, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And in the middle of the video, someone comes in with a gorilla suit, and not like sneaks into the corner, like it goes like between a bunch of people in the gorilla suit, like waves their arms, and then like slowly walks off. They're like, they're very obvious. And I was one of the people who totally missed it. Like, I was so focused on the basketballs that,
Wait, why are you focused on basketball? You were
because it
watching the
was like
video?
a thing, and they kind of set it up about something else. Like, they didn't say exactly what it was, but it's like, oh, just like a test of like attention and blah blah blah. So like, try to, and I'm a little competitive, so they're like, try to accurately count, the passes from this team, not this team. So it was demanding. It was a demanding enough cognitive task that you had to like put
Yeah.
effort to it. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this right. Like, I'm gonna beat the test, or pass the test, whatever.
Yeah.
So I was very focused on it, and I entirely missed
Yeah.
the guy in the gorilla suit walk through the middle of the video very obviously. And when you rewind it back, you're like, oh my God, like, he's like right there. You
I
know,
see. Yeah, I think I heard that before. I heard of that before. But do you think if you just watching a video without like priming to focus on the counting, would you notice the gorilla?
it's very, I mean, way more likely, right? I think
Oh,
it's
okay.
very likely if you were just kind of passively like, okay, what's going on? I think that would naturally be like something that triggers your attention, right? The point of this analogy and this bringing up this experiment is just that the system two, this logical, rational, attention focused system of thinking is very limited. We can only do it so much. So
Or it
you can
take a lot of resource, or you don't have resource to focus on other stuff.
exactly because it's very easy, and we'll talk about this more. But system one, I think it kind of does get a little bit of a bad rap. Like system one, people who they've done tests, it's sort of like y'all know the cookie test where kids were asked to either wait for 2 cookies or eat the cookie they have now. I think they've done tests with this. System one is associated with people who rely on it more for thinking, which is tested by having them do. They can come up with questions where there's like an obvious sounding answer, so it's very easy to intuitively say this. But if you actually just took a moment to kind of reason through it, there's an answer that is it's obvious that answer is wrong, and you're like, oh wait, it's just like a basic trick question, right? So they test people and see how often they'll fall for the trick, or they'll just take a moment to sort of put some effort into thinking it through and being like, oh wait, like that's leading you in the wrong direction, go the wrong. So anyway, the people who
But
do
how's that related to the cookie experiment for kids? No, marshmallow experiment.
the people who fail those questions, so they tend to rely on their system one and not like spend that mental effort to kind of check it. They tend to be the ones who are more impulsive, tends to be ones who go for immediate gratification and have
Uh,
associations with that. So it's all sort of to some degree tied in, this sort of like quick, immediate, not expending effort to think about it. They
mm,
did things where they're more willing to pay more money to get, like, if there's a book they want or something they want, to get it shipped like the same day or like
mm,
next day versus like waiting. So it's associated with that similar like delayed gratification. So
mm. Gotcha.
that's all kind of tied together. But
Gotcha.
um, a lot of these biases, come out in that the way the system two works, it's not like independent, right? So the system one sort of has an immediate reaction to almost everything, and
Mm-hmm.
it sort of feeds that information into your system two.
Mm-hmm.
And that, so that, kind of imparts biases even in some of this like higher level rational thinking. And system one is very, I guess, how do I want to put this? Okay.
It's more like I like to think about it as a survival, right? Like back in it's human, what do you call that? Like stereotypes, right? And decision making, like I guess back in the day when you have an animal try to chase you are gonna eat you, right? You're gonna so when you're surviving in the jungle, you are going to react very quickly to any kind of sound, right? So
Hmm.
this kind of fast thinking, you don't you just once you heard something, you're just gonna run, right? Instead of like just wait and see what's going on, right? You just like almost for survival in a way, you need the models of how the world works, and you just like quickly make a decision and run away from whatever danger, right?
Hmm.
And then of course that snap judgment sometimes can be a mistake, but most sometimes it's saving you, right?
Hmm.
And then now in the modern world it's a little bit different, so your bias may be more, I don't know, error prone or something.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, I would say not even necessarily most of the time it saves you. Like evolution is about like every time it saves you, right? So
Yeah.
like it's always taking like the most like the safest sort of, approach or oftentimes like
A
it's
risk
taking
averse,
a risk
right?
averse approach, yes.
Because it doesn't matter if you win something, you win the outcome, and the majority of the time, if the times you lose, you die, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Now, if I walk in the street in the dark and then I see someone sketchy, it doesn't matter if black or white, if it's no sketchy, I just gonna, pay more attention, right?
yeah.
Mm,
Well, so there's a lot of, and the book goes through a lot of different biases, but I think one of the core, or maybe most important, or kind of, one that kind of relates to a lot of them, is this sort of idea that the system one, this fast intuitive thinking, tries to make judgments about things, right? Really complex things, but very often it can't. Like, you don't have real intuition to answer this question. So what it does is it
yeah.
substitutes it for an easier question. So that
Mm,
the one example they gave is they would they asked some, college students, like all psychology experiments do. They got college students and asked them, how happy are you these days? And they let them get
Mm.
their answer. And they're like, how many dates have you been on, like in the last month or two, or last few months? And what
Mm-hmm.
they found is when they asked this question, no correlation at all, basically none between happiness and dates. And then they just switched the order of the questions. Okay. So they asked first how many dates have they had recently, and then how happy they were. And then it went drastically over to having a super high correlation because,
Mm.
you know, it imparted a sort of recency bias, right? Dates are usually something people consider positive, or their lack of dates is usually something people consider negative. So having just thought about that, the system one was primed to, you know, I guess consider that, and it also affects your mood, right? So instead of
Mm-hmm.
what they were asked was how happy you are these days, but what really they were answering was how do you feel right now? What's your mood right now? And that's because that's the answer your system one can actually give. And very few people like stop to take the time to really think about like, how they have felt over the last few weeks and events and like try to really detailed evaluate it, right? Because they're just doing some
Mm.
QA with some guy, maybe for a $10 gift card or something. They're not that, they're not putting this super deep level of thought. They're just giving their gut reaction. So this sort of recency bias comes up in all sorts of stuff, right? The anchoring effect you might have heard, where the first, like if you're haggling, they say you should put out the first price because that price is like an anchor, and then everything is sort of weighted relative to that, right? Once you see the first price,
Mm-hmm.
if it's more or less, you feel like it's better. This is why Amazon people will sometimes they'll put a price higher to put it on sale, but the sale is what they really wanted to sell it for in the first place. But because of the anchoring effect, they show you a more expensive initial price, and then it feels cheaper because it's supposed to be on sale. You're
Mm-hmm.
anchored to the higher price, and there's a bunch of other mental effects that basically come down to this. Um, I think somewhat, I don't know if it's related, but another kind of concept is just statistical baselines is something people are really bad at dealing with. So when people are thinking about the probabilities of events and stuff, so there's an example of where they describe someone who's kind of like a librarian, quiet, enjoys reading, blah, 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 and ask what sort of job they have. Um, and, or ask between a few jobs, which one's most likely. And most people pick the librarian and they don't pick the farmer, but in the context of this like area or something, like there's way more farmers or some other job that's, 50 times more. There's just 50 times more of this job than the librarian. The librarian's a rare job, the other job's not. So they're like, it doesn't matter if the personality might make someone inclined more towards that other job, just the baseline probability of, well, how many people are there doing these two jobs? So
What's
that's some
the what's the study? That was a study too, right? So what kind of question was they asking the people to answer for the librarian
I
question?
don't I think it was just they just asked them. They like described a person and then asked them like of a few jobs which they thought they did. I don't have this one like written down, but it's one I
So
remembered.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah,
so they asking like Mary, they describe Mary, like Mary or Susan
Mhm.
is blah blah blah, quiet, loving books, and then and the answer is like, oh, is she a librarian? Is that what?
Or is she a
well,
farmer? Or is she like something like a or I think one of it might have been like, or if they were like a cashier or something, right? And like a cashier is a super common job, and a librarian's not a common job. So the correct
Ah,
answer is cashier, but people are like, oh, you describe someone who is like a librarian. I'm going to do a librarian
yeah,
because
ah.
essentially you don't have.
Oh, so basically, librarians are limited in the first place. There's only out of 100 people, maybe one person is librarian, whereas 100
30 people might be
person, maybe
cashiers
30 people might be
of some sort.
cashier. But because of the description on the person, you kind of bias them toward it fits people's mind as a librarian, even though it's more high, the probability is higher than the person is actually just a cashier.
And this, I think, is
Yeah.
kind of there's a clear, similarity with this concept of recency bias. It's, you're invoking these sort of associations that you have built into your brain of what a librarian is like. That's your system one sort of gut intuition, right? You can see
Mm-hmm.
someone and say, oh, they kind of look like someone who does that. And that is information that's provided to your system two, the sort of more rational, logical thinking part of you, but those things bias it, right? Those the outputs of the system one influence your supposed rational thinking of system two. So
Gotcha.
I guess kind of not to talk too long, but sort of I think a good point is, you know, he mentioned this in the book, and you know, people say, well, how do I solve my biases? You know, you all found all these different biases, you know, how they'll say, how do I stop using my system one, like, you know, and always be like a perfectly rational person? And the answer is it's impossible, because you know, you can't, and you shouldn't, because the system one, to be honest, the system one makes a huge amounts of decisions and judgments that are accurate all the time, and we don't talk about those because they're not interesting. So what, you know, they find is that 1% of the time where it's biased, it's incorrect, and you say, oh, this is screwed up. But the system two, you know, simply can't like handle the job. You cannot always think about system two, and you shouldn't even. Like it's not like a perfect system either. I think one of the biases that I think I would say comes from system two is sort of rationalization. So like maybe you maybe coming from system two is not the right part, but people rationalize, right? This is, you know, they have, you know, they have things they feel, beliefs they have, and they will spend their time coming up with reasons to justify it rather than you know, honestly evaluating it, right? The example that gets me is in sort of internet things, right? You'll see a stupid meme make some argument, and if people agree with it, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's so true, this random internet guy really gets it. And then you'll see an actual like scientific paper publishing evidence for something. Not that all scientific papers are perfect, as we all know. We know very well, but still, right? Like it's actually been done by professional researchers, it's been like peer reviewed, and people will tear it apart just based on the title and that it says something they don't like, right? It claims there's evidence that disagrees with their beliefs, and they won't even read it. They'll just read the title and they'll be like, this is a shit study. Like, did they? It's hilarious. Many times I've seen people be like, did they take into account like XYZ, very obvious factors? And if you read the abstract, they're like, we took into, you know, these, you know, things into account, you know, corrected for, you know, wealth or income of the area or whatever, blah, 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 other obvious things. But because it like, you know, because the study disagrees with what they want to believe, they spend a lot of time using their system two to come up with reasons why it shouldn't be believed, right? It's not accurate. So I guess the point would be there's a lot of biases, and a lot of them do come from these gut feelings you have, your intuition, your system one. But you know, it's not, the system one is still pretty good actually. The system two is not perfect. So really you just gotta, what you gotta do is when it comes to something important, you gotta take a step back, do the metacognition that Michael was talking about earlier. In the important moments, you need to say, let me step back and really think about it, double check what I'm thinking about and why, to try to be honest. Otherwise, you just live your life. That is
So
my
you say
spiel.
you say in the conclusion, whatever. So the thinking system one. So is there any way he said how to? I think you kind of mentioned a little bit in the pause and think, but is there any way did he in the book offer any way of not improving improve your thinking in a way, in some
Uh,
ways?
well, you know, maybe at the
Nice.
end, which I haven't gone to, but he brought up at some point, and it's really just, you know, the only thing I've seen so far is just try to be mindful when you need to, right? It's not that you should always be doing it, but like if something's important, take a moment to try to be mindful of what might be biasing you. You know, if you have a gut feeling, think, why do I have that? And, you know, is that a fair, you know, is that something I should trust? Because gut feelings aren't bad. I mean, um, expertise can basically be a trained intuition, right? That's one way you can kind of define expertise. So in the right situations, intuitions can be really good. So those situations are when someone has the ability to do a lot of practice, when this thing has a regularity to it, right? So an environment that can be learned. Someone has a lot of practice to learn it, and there's quick feedback so that they can, you know, learn when they made the wrong judgment, the right judgment quickly. If you sort of have a situation like that, like which is like a chess, a board game, or video games, right? People can, you know, very easily see what happens, and then they make their decisions, and then they see if it helps or hurts them. But on the flip side, you have stocks, right? There's all these infamous cases of a monkey throwing a dart at a board and beating expert stockbrokers, right? Well, why can't they win? Well, because maybe the environment, like the stock values going up and down, it's not really knowable, right? Like you can't actually predict it if if it's not possible to predict, there's no amount of practice can allow you to do it, right?
You learn
So
it, yeah.
the point is you can build up an expert intuition in a narrow field or a narrow area. So it's not even that you should just not use your intuition. You just need to be careful about it. And when it's something important, right? If it's what you want for dinner that night, it doesn't matter, right? But if you're talking about a major project or a major life decision, step back and kind of analyze your own thinking.
Yeah, one thing, yeah, I was aware of, like, before in the book, actually, I was reading this study, the author, what's his name again?
Daniel
Yeah,
Kahneman.
Kahneman. Yeah,
Kahneman.
yeah. I was reading something about prospect theory that he and the other author, they won a Nobel Prize for it. For economic behavior, it's called prospect theory. I think the whole theory says we underestimate something that is high probability of high risk but has high probability. I don't remember exactly now actually. But anyway, the main thing is what?
So, well, I'm guessing we overestimate high risk, low probability things
Yeah,
because I do
yeah,
it. I'm
yeah.
terrible about it. Yes.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
that's definitely something I've heard people, something I've heard brought up, and I think people do. It might come back to this whole if you're wrong about this, high risk event, you die. There could be a good reason for that, but
Yeah, it's more about the cars, I guess. The car accidents and airplane crashes, I guess. You see more you hear in the I don't know. Probably I don't want to say too much because probably wrong. But either way, yeah, I was aware of that. I tried to apply to my research, but didn't get a chance to. Also, it was kind of anyway. I think the other thing is about rational and irrational is like humor actually is basically irrational, right? Well, I guess when system like AI research back in the day, they always try to design rational agents, right? Try to apply economic models to analyze economics, right? It's always assume that human actually are rational, but then you find out actually human are very irrational. So all your model for macroeconomics all fall apart, right? Because you assume that made the assumption that humans are rational while we are actually extremely irrational, right? And I think this book kind of talk about the two because of our biases and the system one, system two.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, if rationality is like, I mean, it depends what you mean by rationality, right? If by rationality is, you sit down and like deliberate over everything, we do that for only a very small amount of our, choices.
Yeah.
But, I would also say kind of, most of the time that's fine. Most of the time that is arguably the right call. To spend that level of like energy and time to deliberate would be a waste anyway. So
So what was in the book that you learned that is like unexpected that I guess that wasn't the most surprising thing that you learned from this book.
That's a really good question. Complicated by the fact that I read most of what I've read originally a little bit while ago. So now I have trouble remembering what exactly was like, surprised me. I think I think to some degree while I was reading this, I remember like I've seen a lot of a lot of this was sort of ideas I've already seen because I feel like the concept of biases, I was in a class that showed me the gorilla video, the concept of like mental biases and all these different names for different ones. This has been sort of spread around and popularized at this point that I think a lot of people have seen them. So it didn't surprise me, but I guess what I took away from the book is sort of how it tied it all together and sort of formalized something that, we all have. I think most people also have an intuitive idea of like, oh, you have your gut instinct and you can take time to really think it through, right? In a very, loose way, but it's sort of formalizing the sort of the difference between the two, and you providing examples of how, like, hey, this is an instance when this one does, is going, this is a bias it can cause, this is how, how it interacts with each other.
Mm.
But
Yeah. So
I know that's not an interesting answer, but
yeah,
sorry.
not yet. How did you why did you decide to read this book in the first place?
Shoot, I bought this book a long time ago.
Or
Gosh.
why did you buy it in the first place then?
I really haven't read that much about thinking, sort of
Mm-hmm.
metacognition.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked reasonably good / interesting. So I decided it's just a topic that, I felt like I could try to branch out into more. It's, these sort of this sort of book is usually your sort of book, Shu, right? You read a lot
Yeah.
about like how to think, how to do things. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you read this book, right? So this was me being like, maybe I should read a book like that, see if I,
Mm-hmm.
gain some insight, gain some knowledge.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't I was listening to I listened to audiobook. I need to read a book actually. The audiobook is a little bit kind of, I would say, a little bit boring because the narrator is more like, I'm not sure if the author actually read it, but he's a scientist. He's not really a good, he have a very good almost like lecturer professor, right? So as you imagine, the tone of the narration is a little bit monotone, a little bit at
Uh-huh.
times. So but anyway, also he's so productive too, and I mean, he's probably in the 80s or he's 80 and still like, producing a lot of work. So anyway, so
But yeah, no, it's an interesting book. If you haven't been exposed to the ideas of like
yeah.
cognitive biases, like if you haven't seen a list and had people talk about examples, I would say it's a pretty good book to pick up because you'll probably be like rocked. If you have, but you want to learn, like if you've sort of have seen these sort of examples, these sort of discussions, and you want to get more into the details, it's a good book. If you're kind of familiar with the concept of like, oh yeah, we have biases, of course, and you can spend your time,
All right.
to try to deal with those.
So
If you don't
I
really
think
care that
everything,
much, don't read
yeah,
it.
I think everything all come down to making money. So how can I use this book to make money?
I don't think there's going to be a lot of direct ways. Potentially, it could help you avoid a bias that would potentially make a worse judgment. But
Okay, to lose
this is going to
money
be
in a way.
very indirect, so I don't know if I wouldn't buy this book to make
Is there
money.
anything that you learn in there? Is there anything in the book that you can use to con people, to trick people?
There probably is. I had never considered it that way, but if you studied it, there's probably something you could apply to, yeah,
Play into people's biases, right?
exactly.
So, I mean,
Oh,
like
what?
a simple, well, play into people's biases. So, like, if there's someone
Yeah.
with lots of money who's just dying to give away money, just be like, oh, yeah, I went to the same school as you did, and I sort of look and think like you, and I grew up in your neighborhood when I was younger. Like, I
But
mean,
you did say earlier, right? You did say about anchoring, right? Negotiation, right? You
Mhm.
anchor it high, something higher,
yeah,
That's true.
right?
That is something, right? Like they say you should always throw out the first number in a negotiation. So
Yeah. Even the other thing about even a gorilla video, right? I think magicians have been using that for a long, long, long time, right? Forever.
yes, that's true. I mean, I don't think you should become a magician if you want to make money. I feel like that's
yeah,
But I think another thing is about what do you call it, like the Liberian example, right? People judge based on how you present yourself, right?
hmm
So you can present if you want other people to think how like you fit into certain class of personality or something. That
right.
now if you want to portray yourself as some certain class of person, you can basically just pretend yourself or dress like how you face yourself, just like fake it until you make it, right?
Mm.
Like like George Santos, right? He probably he probably mold himself into certain like image of like people have as a politician or someone like that, right? So
Here's a while you can use it. When airplanes are like Do you want to pay more to insure your flight? Click no. I would argue they're trying to, well, obviously they make more money getting that from people than they give out to, like, right? Because that's why
Yeah.
they offer it, to make money. So,
Yeah.
don't allow your risk aversion or your concern over a low probability event, dissuade you. Just, insurance is a scam, essentially, is what I'm saying. So you shouldn't spend money on it.
Well,
So
especially that insurance
insurance-
is terrible.
What about car insurance then? What the heck?
Unfortunately, you're legally required to. So
So the whole season, the whole government having gone into that the insurance
it's true.
industry.
Bought by big insurance. Well, there is something about people hitting other people and needing, and otherwise they wouldn't be able to, cover the damages. So it's not quite the exact same
Yeah, and
thing,
it just yeah, it
but
is
I try to,
complicated. Yeah.
I saying insurance is a scam is a joke, but I think insuring more than a few key things, actually, I don't do a lot of. I think it's probably a bad idea because it's very clear that the insurance companies make more money, from the people who are paying into it than they give out back to the people, right? So you're very likely going to pay more. So unless it's something devastating where you could not, you would like lose your life / like your whole savings or whatever, there's not really a reason to.
Hmm.
It's crazy. I've seen ads for people. This is a totally different topic, but I've seen ads for some company that's like, we'll insure your phone and your TV and your video game console and your couch for like $5 a month. And I'm like, who the fuck is trying to just insure their random shit? Like just around their house? Like, what would be the point unless you were like trying to scam them, being like, I'm gonna break my TV in a year so I get a new one off my insurance company, right? Like I cannot believe this is like a real thing, but there's ads
Yeah.
for it, so it must
Yeah,
be.
it's playing on people's fears, I guess.
I don't know.
The risk averse thing. Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, mental biases, how we think.
Mm.
As you say, I'm not saying it's the most exciting read, but I think it is good to, at least learn a little bit about it so you can try to recognize it, right?
Yeah, no, I
Because
think it's a very interesting read if you haven't really seen that kind of studies before, right? If you never, because we have been aware of those studies a lot, anyway, like scientific study. If someone had never really, it would be very, very interesting actually. Because when I first read those study, I'd say, oh, holy fuck, I didn't even. Now, just talking about a librarian example, right? Because I wasn't aware of that issue when I read it. I said, oh yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, something that I'm kind of surprising about, right? Because you always have to, yeah. Anyway, so that is very interesting. I would say, yeah, that probably is one of the interesting thing I learned from those studies. Yeah, like the librarian example that come to mind.
what is nice about this sort of book is like, if you haven't seen them, a lot of these they can get you because they'll just be like, oh, we're just going to ask you a question, like do this honestly. And it's like when I first saw the gorilla video, right? If I saw it again now, I have seen it again now, right? Becomes something, the same thing or something similar comes up, and I'm like, I see what they're doing. But like
Yeah.
the first time it gets you, then you're like, oh damn, they
Yeah.
tricked me, right? So that can keep
Yeah.
things exciting.
So it's a good book to read if you want to guard against, people try to trick you, basically.
That's
Just
true.
don't be a fool. Yeah, don't get tricked. Yeah.
Essentially just exposure. Just exposure to stuff can make it more obvious when you're like something could be playing into it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oof. All right. Well, enough of that.
All right. Should we end here?
Until next time.